I think we're all at this point at least vaguely familiar with the Ari's teachings about the 7 stages of feminine development, of her and, of course, our journey from diminishment toward fullness of stature that happens on all scales, meaning the inner feminine inside all people, male and female alike. The chronicle of women in relation to men is a historical process. The marital microcosm, which has its own life cycle, and then creation, the entirety of creation, as feminine, mushpa, shchina, in relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The messianic ideal and destiny of all this, as described by the Ari, is for he and she to finally meet panim b'panim, shaveh legamri, face to face and completely equal. Now, panim comes from the same root as panimiyut, which means that this messianic culmination is not a superficial meeting, but a deep encounter of core to core and tip to toe. The Torah uses the word da'at as its euphemism for marital union. And Adam knew Chava, and they were as one flesh. Based on this grammatical hint, the consummate messianic union, as understood by Kabbalah, happens essentially on the level of da'at, of seeing and being seen, knowing and being known with loving eyes. That's the ultimate intimacy. And the ikar, zivug, the union of yesodot, then follows later. Now, it's a principle of Kabbalah from the Sefer Yetzirah that the end is wedged in the beginning. And since Avram and Sarah are our beginning as a people, our first couple, so to speak, our first Jewish couple, it must be that they also model the special attainments of the messianic end as well. The Ari explains that even though the course of history is a single moon cycle, and each generation is primarily holding at one or another of these 7 stages, still, in each generation, there is some one or some few who are the stand-ins for all the other stages that are not the primary one happening at that time. It seems clear that Avram and Sarah were the placeholders for the 7th stage of relationship, even though humanity in their days was probably holding at stage 2. And so, again, just to repeat, what's the distinguishing feature of this 7th stage? It's when he and she finally meet face to face, core to core, tip to toe. So the question I'd like to explore is, how is that modeled by Sarah and Abraham? I'm going to make 3 points that correspond to the 3 faces of Sarah Imenu, each reflecting one of her 3 names. The first celebrates Sarah, the second Yiska, and the third Sarai. Starting with Sarah and Abraham. The first thing I'd like to look at is their mission to be the founding couple, the progenitors of the Jewish nation. Abraham, without Sarah, produced Ishmael, who was not Jewish. It took the input of both of them, both Abraham and Sarah, to produce the first Jewish-born child. I want to talk for a minute about what went into that. If you ask the man on the street, what made Avram and Sarah the first Jews, they'll answer that they were the first monotheists. But the Torah itself belies that fact. Adam talked to God. Noah talked to God. Abraham gave tithes to Melchizedek as the priest to the Kel Elyon. And the Medrash reports that Abraham actually studied in the yeshiva of Shem and Eber, where he delved into the mysteries of the Holy One. Clearly, there was a tradition of monotheism that predated Abraham and Sarah, that was passed down through the generations, from Adam to Shes to Noah to Shem and Eber, from parent to child, master to disciple, from the beginning of time. So then, what distinguished Abraham and Sarah? What did make them the first Jews, the first Ivrim, the first river crossers? So to explain that, I need to define a couple terms. They are mahut and atzmut, both of which mean essence. Mahut is abstract essence. It's what a teacher gives over to a student. A teacher reads books, observes the world, accumulates life experience, and transmits the essence of all that to his students. There's nothing of substance exchanged. It's a purely abstract transmission, information. What is that? It's intangible. Whereas Atzmut is substance essence. It's what a parent gives to a child. Every cell in the child's body is carrying something of the genetic stuff of its parents. Atzmut is substance essence. And that brings us back to Avram and Sarah. The idea being that what distinguished them is that they so totally devoted themselves to the service of the Kel Elyon that they integrated and internalized the truth of divine oneness down to their bones, into their nerve net. And in so doing, they actually turned Mahut into Atzmut. Now, through them and through the lineage that they founded, the capacity to grasp oneness, to understand what it means that God is one on the deepest possible level, on the 50th gate level of understanding, i.e. Mahut, that became a genetic spiritual inheritance that could and would now be passed through seed, i.e. Atzmut, as the defining feature of a Jewish soul. And that quantum shift in the universe, that crossing of the mind-body rift, required the utter consuming contribution of both of them. And that's what we see in the Pshat. The truth of divine oneness was not just a belief for Avram and Sarah. Rather, it was a mission. They devoted their lives to spreading the word of ethical monotheism to a world that was steeped in idolatry. They didn't just open an exclusive mystery school and educate the spiritually elect. They preached to the masses. And what is relevant here is that they were a team, Shaveh Legamri. Abraham taught the men and Sarah taught the women, says the Midrash. And it was this demanding mission and their shared dedication to it that produced the inner transformation, the Mahut turned Atzmut, the river crossing that seeded the Jewish nation. And of course, as we know, it's not just a genetic matter. The Jewishness of a gestating soul is primarily determined by its sharing the blood supply with the mother, i.e. in this case, Sarah. As the Torah states explicitly, Hadam hu hanefesh, the blood carries the soul. So just like Avram becomes Avraham, Av Hamon Goyim, father to a multitude of nations, so Sarai becomes Sarah, the grand Ima of that same multitude of nations. Now, there's so much more to say about Sarah and all this, but I'm going to stop here and close the portion that is the tribute to Sarah and move on to Yiska. And here now I want to speak about the matter of Sarah's prophecy, which, says the Midrash, was even greater than Abraham's. The source for this teaching, of course, is the passage where Sarah has determined that Hagar and Ishmael must leave. They are endangering Yitzchak, not just spiritually, but also literally. And so she deems it pikuach nefesh, a threat to life, and insists that they depart to their homeland immediately. Avraham balks at the request. He doesn't refuse, but is aggrieved. Hashem steps in and directs Avraham not to lament the boy or his mother. They will achieve greatness in their way. But in the meantime, all that Sarah has said to you, Shma B'kola, listen to her voice. The rabbis read this as an unequivocal proof that Sarah's prophecy was higher than Abraham's. I'm going to quibble a little with the language and approach the matter from a different angle. I'll eventually come to the same conclusion, but from a different route that is more relevant to the 7th stage of feminine development and its messianic features. So this brings us to the distinction between prophecy and Ruach HaKodesh, which are 2 points on a continuum of bestowed enlightenment. Prophecy is the masculine modality and associates with the written Torah that was revealed through a prophetic channel, whose light clearly derived from above and without. Ruach HaKodesh, which could be thought of as divinely inspired intuition, is a feminine reflecting light that associates with the oral Torah, whose truths arise from below and within. In Ruach HaKodesh, says Kabbalah, a spirit of wisdom rises from the bones, from the breath of the bones, Hevle de Garma, to be exact. Now, most assume that prophecy is the more exalted Dvekud, for its word comes straight from God. In the grip of prophecy, the seer's personality goes underground, for its individualisms would distort the signal. Only a perfectly transparent ego can rightly claim, Ko Amar Hashem, so says God. The Talmud, however, disagrees. The sage is it disagrees with the hierarchy. The sage is superior to the prophet, it claims. Based on this and other sources, Ramban ranks Ruach HaKodesh higher than prophecy. Rav Tzadok HaKohen concurs and explores the matter at length. Both prophecy and Ruach HaKodesh have their advantages. Prophecy is a face-to-face encounter with the Holy One and transmits God's literal word. Whereas in Ruach HaKodesh, Hashem is not an obvious partner, and its message has a significant margin of error. But Ruach HaKodesh has its own advantages. On the inner planes, things are close when they are similar and distant when they are different. In Ruach HaKodesh, we join with our Creator in the delight of chidush, of creativity and innovation. And our bond comes from sharing the creative process itself. This is a core-to-core intimacy, for creativity springs from the soul's depths. Unlike prophecy, the personality is present and active in Ruach HaKodesh. If the purpose of creation is to actualize the potential of relationship between us and God, then this happens consummately through Ruach HaKodesh. In prophecy, the seer is but an instrument of divine revelation. Their dynamic is more like master-slave. The less of a mark the prophet leaves on the transmission, the better. Ruach HaKodesh is the opposite. Its transmission requires us to assert ourselves, to try to solve the problem ourselves, and to give that effort our all. It is that personal exertion which primes the pump that elicits the flow of guidance from on high. Ruach HaKodesh requires our full and active presence. The ultimate fulfillment of relationship, says the Ari, is when he and she meet from the crown of their heads to the soles of their feet. When every point of one is met and matched by the other. This happens most exquisitely in the mutual partnership between us and God that is the very definition of Ruach HaKodesh. The era of prophecy has passed. The task at hand as we move toward the 7th stage is to cultivate Ruach HaKodesh, to live in alignment with Hashem's will and spiritual law 24/7. Prophecy is periodic. Ruach HaKodesh is ideally constant. Prophecy is exclusive. Ruach HaKodesh is available to all. Mashiach will not be the ultimate prophet. That distinction stays with Moshe. Mashiach will be a master of Ruach HaKodesh. Everything that Moshe revealed through prophecy, including the chukim, the seemingly irrational mitzvot, Mashiach will derive it all from Chachma and explain the sense of it through Ruach HaKodesh. Abraham was a prophet, as Hashem declares to Avimelech, V'ata hashev eshet ha'ish ki navihu. Now return that man's wife, for he is a prophet. Conversely, Sarah was distinguished by her Ruach HaKodesh. As we know, Sarah had three names: Sarai, Sarah, and Yiska. Sarah and Sarai convey her spiritual royalty, her status as princess, in the way she moved through the world with dignity, beauty, and wisdom. Yiska, says Rashi, is because she was known to possess an innate and uncanny capacity for divine inspiration. Already then, before they even set out on their mission together, in the list of extended family accompanying Terach, when he set out from Ur Kasdim, there appears the name Yiska, and Rashi informs us, Zu Sarah, al Shem Shesachta Baruch HaKodesh. This is Sarah, because she could sense the future through her Ruach HaKodesh. So yes, Sarah's prophecy was greater than Abraham's, not because she was a clearer prophet than he, but because her specialty was Ruach HaKodesh, which is actually a more evolved channel of divine inspiration than prophecy, at least in potential, according to some. This superiority of Ruach HaKodesh over prophecy will only become clear in our messianic stage of development when all things feminine have attained their full stature and are manifesting their full glory. So here again, Avraham and Sarah are embodying that seventh stage, Eshes Chayil Ateret Ba'ala, where the feminine and her Ruach HaKodesh supersedes the masculine and becomes the holder of the higher lights, as articulated by the Balatanya and translated in the Kabbalistic Writings book, chapter 8. And with that, I'll close the tribute to Yiska and move to Sarai. So you might not be aware that every letter in the alphabet appears at least once as super big and once as super small. It's a Kabbalistic tradition that the regular letters correspond to the lower masculine expression of divinity, called HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The super small letters then associate with the lower Shekhinah, situated in the 10th and lowest sphere of Malchut. And the super big letters correspond to the higher Shekhinah, whose base of operations is the sphera of Binah. The super small letters convey the more fallen or broken or immature expression of that letter, and vice versa for the super big. All this to say that the small bet appears in the Parsha of Chayei Sarah, in the verse which describes Sarah's death and funeral. The pasuk reads, "And Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. V'yavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'livkotah." And Avraham came to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. The small bet appears in the word v'livkotah, and to weep for her. There is a midrash that asserts that Avraham's eulogy for Sarah was metaphorically a version of Eshes Chayil, and that he went through each verse and connected it to Sarah. And so here, in this tender moment of eulogizing the love of his life, he's not connecting to Sarah, the public figure, the Im of a multitude of nations, but to Sarai, his dear, precious wife, his princess. And the small bet in the word for crying conveys that Avraham wept, literally, like a child, for his lost love. The point being that Avraham and Sarah were dearly beloveds, and Sarah's strength, greatness, wisdom, and even superiority in regards to their respective prophecies was welcomed by Avraham and embraced by him. And that's the third lesson about our seventh stage of feminine development, which is that just like in the Jewish calendar, there is a whole science of how to keep the solar masculine and the solar year masculine and the lunar year feminine in sync with each other. So is that the case in the world. For women to rise, and for that rising to really bring Mashiach, so to speak, there needs to be men that honor, embrace, support, and truly, truly, truly appreciate rising women, i.e., men who follow in Abraham's shoes, men who know that it's a win-win prospect, men who get the Ari's vision that consummation cannot happen if either party is diminished relative to the other. For in that case, there are always parts of one sticking out of the union unmet and unmatched by the other. So I want to bless us as individuals, as a group, as members of the Jewish people and the larger world community, that Hashem should help us, men and women alike, to negotiate this new frontier, this seventh stage of feminine development that has never existed in the universe before. And as we step into its great unknown, with Ruach HaKodesh as our compass, may it always lead us to the most spiritually productive option. And may we choose it with a whole heart, because our taste buds have genuinely learned to prefer the taste of tov, of good, over ego comfort. Samach nafshenu bishuasecha. Let our nefesh, our pleasure-seeking level of soul, learn to take its truest joy from the many yeshuot, the many redemptions and forward steps happening within each moment that are pushing us toward the fullness of stature that marks our long-awaited final redemption. Zion, Kabbalistically, is the place of union between masculine and feminine. Kucha brechu v'shchinte. So I'll end with a verse of prayer. Or chadash al Zion ta'ir, v'nizke chulanu mehera la'oro. Shine a new light on Zion, and may we, meaning all of us, without exception, speedily merit to its light. Bye.